Alright, so this is some last minute tips and tricks for when it actually comes to sitting down for IB Physics and taking the exams. Let's get started with some advice for paper 1. My first tip is to spend 10 or so minutes to do about 3 or 4 past IB questions to get warmed up beforehand. So just make sure you are checking to see that you got the answers correct, and you can use some of my old videos on this channel if you would like to do so. When it actually comes to the test though, do the easy questions first. I would skip a question if it looks hard, and this will help maximize your points and help you gain confidence and momentum so that you can answer those hard questions. Now aim for about a minute per question. I would say this is a general good rule. Obviously some questions might take you as little as like 20 seconds, but you're going to be wasting time flipping pages, bubbling in answers, reading the questions and whatnot. So my point is, especially for the SL exam, you're going to want to be much faster than 45 minutes. So that being said, it is important to fully understand what is being asked of you. So make sure you fully read the question and underline important parts of it. So here are some examples of key phrases that you might want to underline. Next, read the answer choices and look for patterns. Look for significant figures. So this can be useful in solving the question, but also for guessing later on. So here's an example. Notice that the answers are all pretty much the same. The only thing that is different is significant figures. So if you compare the significant figures in the question and the answer choices, we can see that the answer is going to be B, 2 significant figures. We don't need to do any calculations. I can solve this in 20 seconds. So here's another example. You can see that the answers all include G, so there's no need to substitute in a constant and give us extra work. Normally I'd substitute in 10, not 9.81, because that's going to give me extra work and I don't have a calculator for paper 1. But normally I'd substitute this in and I'd have to multiply it. That's a lot of extra work and time that I don't want to waste in this question. Here's another example of saving yourself some work, right? The answer choices aren't simplified all the way and they are in terms of P. So this is going to be helpful when I start solving the question. But do be aware that they will try to trick you. One of the ways that they like to do this is providing information that you don't need. So here, you don't need to know that the distance is 2 kilometers from the base of the cliff. This is just extra information meant to confuse you. Next, open the data booklet to the topic that the question is on, right? It's easy to not remember a formula or a relationship just off the top of your head, right? And the data booklet is going to be there to help you remember and see these connections. So it's very important. But don't be overly concerned with the formulas. Some of these questions can be solved logically, and real-life examples and diagrams are going to help you with those. Also, don't be afraid to write in the exam booklet. No, list what you know, list what you need to know. Here's an example of a table for kinematics. And another point is, it may seem simple, but cross out the wrong answers, especially if it is a table answer. So if you're stuck, move on and mark the question to come back to later. Again, this question is all about time, and you do not want to be stuck on a question wasting your valuable time. In the last 5 minutes or so, you are going to want to review your answers and make educated guesses. So for educated guesses, well, here you might guess to eliminate B because it is the only one with a 7. It's not like the others. So now it's between A, C, and D, and I like those odds much better. If you have a table like these, which I mentioned earlier, I would say that the answers are slightly less likely to be 2 of the same extreme, like maximum and minimum, but I wouldn't rely on this. This is only for the last minute resort. So personally, I would not guess those, but that is my personal strategy. It's really up to you. Moving on to paper 2 and 3, my first point of advice is to not think about the previous papers, really. Don't let it get in your head, and just don't talk to others about it. Your focus should be on the upcoming paper. So what you should be doing is getting ready for the exam, right? Making sure you have warmed up, just like you did for paper 1. For actually taking the exam, use the first 5 minutes to plan your path. Again, I recommend starting easy with the easy questions. And these questions are going to have multiple parts, so you're going to want to spend time on each of those. The data booklet is probably going to be more useful for paper 2 and your option in paper 3 than it was for paper 1. For the questions, pay close attention to the units, especially in the graphs. And for written answers, you should be concise yet complete. So answer the question, but you don't need to write in full sentences or even paragraphs. Don't be flinging your arms around hoping to hit an answer. Also, make sure to pay attention to the number of points that a question has. So this is going to help give you a sense of the difficulty and what you might need to do to solve this question. And keep in mind that these questions often build upon each other. The result from the first question or so, maybe it's the second question, is probably going to be used later on. So one of the things that they like to do is show that the velocity is 3 meters per second, for example. That way, if you're stuck on the first question, you can use that velocity value in solving one of the later questions, or parts of the question, I guess. So one common mistake is that the best fit line does not necessarily mean a straight line, so just be careful of that. And make sure to show your work, especially if it is a multiple point question. This is how they often award those points. Then know your command terms. I would Google the IB Physics command terms and read that document. You can really learn a lot of valuable stuff from that. One example is the word state. If the question says state, you know that no calculation is necessary. You probably already have that value. Now, it's okay if you don't finish paper 2. This is a hard test, and you can still score well with missing answers. So focus on getting the answers right in paper 2 rather than rushing through them as you might be more likely to do in paper 1. Now, review each section before you move on. Questions are going to have multiple parts, so I would review your answers while your mind is still on that question. And lastly, know your definitions. Definitions are going to come up a lot, so make sure to spend some time, maybe the night or morning before, doing some light review. As far as general advice goes, one of the biggest things is just not to stress too much. A little bit amount of stress is going to be normal, but keep in mind that the grade boundaries are not that high. So in 2023, you could get a 50% on SL paper 1 and still get a 5 for that paper. And as always, make sure to get good sleep and food. Stick to the food that you know works. Don't try something new and get sick for exam day. And again, don't be afraid to skip questions. I'm repeating some points from earlier, but this is just because they're very important. Time is of the essence. I can almost guarantee that there will be a question you haven't seen anything similar to, so just try your best on these questions, right? Make sure you can complete any points that you know. Again, read carefully so you understand the question, flag questions to come back to, and stay organized. Make tables and diagrams if needed, and ask yourself if the answer is reasonable within the context of the question. So the coefficient of restitution is not really going to be greater than 1, and if you have an index of refraction of like 159, you can pretty confidently say that that is a wrong answer. But don't cram and study too much beforehand. It just doesn't work. It might sound good, but that time is better spent sleeping, in my opinion. Again, time is so much important for each paper. And lastly, there are no points off for a wrong answer, so don't leave any potential marks on the table. Well, that's all the advice that I have. If you have any of your own, please feel free to comment them down below. And just a last word is good luck. You've got this.